Welcome back to Channel 19 Mysteries. I'm your host, Midnight Rider. Imagine a road so isolated that the silence rings in your ears. A two-lane strip of asphalt cutting through the heart of a continent where the nearest help is hundreds of miles away and the darkness is absolute. They say the Australian Outback is beautiful, but it's also indifferent to human life. Tonight, we are driving into the void of the Stuart Highway. We're following the headlights into a story of a dream vacation that collided with pure evil, a roadside ambush, a desperate escape into the scrub, and a mystery that still haunts the red dirt to this day. Before we hit the road, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. It really helps us out. Now, let's get into tonight's story. How a road train stopped a murderer. The Stuart Highway in Australia is not just a road, it is a scar. It is a two-lane strip of asphalt that slices vertically through the dead center of the Australian continent, running from Port Augusta in the south all the way up to Darwin in the tropical north. It covers nearly 2,000 miles of some of the most inhospitable terrain on the face of the earth. Locals don't call it the Stuart Highway, they call it the track. To drive the track is to enter a world of sensory deprivation. You can drive for hours, sometimes entire days, without seeing a single building, a single town, or even another human being. To your left is red dirt. To your right is red dirt. And ahead of you is a horizon that shimmers in the heat, stretching out into an infinity of scrub brush and silence. But at night, the track changes. It stops being just a lonely road and becomes something else entirely, something claustrophobic. In the Australian Outback, there is no light pollution. When the sun goes down, it doesn't just get dark, it gets black paint dark. The kind of dark where you can't see your own hand in front of your face. If you turn off your headlights, the world simply ceases to exist. The only things out there are the kangaroos, the wild camels, the dingoes, and the road trains. On the night of the 14th of July, 2001, Vincent Millar was pushing a massive Kenworth truck north along the track. Vincent was a career truckie, a man who had spent more of his life looking out a windshield than he had looking at his own living room walls. And the rig he was driving wasn't just a standard 18-wheeler like you see in the United States. This was a road train. If you've never seen a road train, picture a standard semi-truck. Now, add a trailer. Then, add another. Then, add a third. These mechanical leviathans can stretch over 175 feet long and weigh upwards of 100 tons. When a road train is moving at cruising speed about 60 to 70 miles per hour, it carries so much kinetic energy that it is effectively a freight train on rubber tires. It cannot swerve. It cannot stop quickly. It is a missile of steel and diesel fuel. Vincent knew the rules of the road better than anyone. He knew that when you're hauling that much weight, you don't react to things, you anticipate them. You watch the edges of the high beams for the reflective eyes of kangaroos. If a kangaroo jumps out, you don't brake. You can't. If you slam on the brakes for a kangaroo, the trailers behind you might jackknife, swinging around to crush the cab and kill you instantly. So, the grim rule of the road train driver is simple. You keep your foot on the gas, you grip the wheel, and you let the massive bull bar on the front of the truck do its job. It was just after midnight. Vincent was tired. The rhythmic thrum, thrum, thrum of the tires on the asphalt was hypnotic. He was miles from civilization, deep in the Northern Territory, a place where the distance between gas stations is measured in hours, not minutes. He was currently passing through a stretch of nothingness, north of a tiny settlement called Barrow Creek. His co-driver was asleep in the bunk behind him. It was just Vincent, the green glow of the dashboard dials and the twin cones of his headlights cutting through the void. He checked his mirrors, blackness. He checked his gauges, normal. He looked back at the road, and that's when he saw it. About 300 yards ahead, on the left shoulder of the highway, a shadow detached itself from the scrub. Vincent squinted. His first thought was kangaroo. It was the right size, maybe a big red, standing on its hind legs. But the movement was wrong. Kangaroos hop. They have a distinct rhythmic gait. The shadow was stumbling. It was erratic. He took his foot off the accelerator, letting the engine brake growl, slowing the massive rig down just a fraction. Cow? Sometimes cattle wandered onto the unfenced highway. Hitting a cow was dangerous. They were heavy enough to damage the steering. But as the distance closed 200 yards, 150 yards, the shape resolved into something that made Vincent's brain stutter. It was standing on two legs. It had arms. It was waving. It was a person. What the hell? Vincent muttered. Seeing a pedestrian on the Stuart Highway in the middle of the day is rare. Seeing one at midnight, 50 miles from the nearest light bulb, is impossible. Vincent checked his mirrors again. Was there a broken down car? No. No hazard lights, no flares, just the empty, consuming dark. The figure on the side of the road was frantic. It was a woman. She was jumping up and down, her arms flailing above her head. She was right on the edge of the asphalt, dangerously close to the lane. Vincent's boot hovered over the brake pedal. He was doing the math in his head. 100 tons, 60 miles per hour. If I slam the brakes, do I kill us? And then the unthinkable happened. Just as the nose of the massive bull bar was about to pass her, the woman didn't step back. She didn't freeze. She lunged. She threw herself directly into the center of the lane, right in front of the thundering road train. Vincent didn't think. Instinct took over. He slammed both feet onto the brake pedal and hauled on the air horn. The sound of the horn was deafening, a scream of compressed air that echoed across the empty desert. The truck shuddered violently, the tires locked up, screeching and smoking as they dragged across the asphalt. The trailer couplings groaned under the immense strain of the sudden deceleration. But physics is a cruel mistress. You cannot stop a road train on a dime. Vincent watched in horror as the woman disappeared beneath the front of his hood. He felt a sickening thump. The truck continued to slide, skidding for what felt like an eternity, burning rubber for hundreds of yards before finally, mercifully, grinding to a halt. Silence rushed back into the cab. The engine idled roughly. The smell of burnt rubber was overpowering. Vincent sat there for a second, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at the sleeper curtain. His co-driver was awake now, confused, asking what happened. I hit her, Vincent whispered. I think I killed her. He grabbed his heavy maglite flashlight, kicked open the door, and jumped down onto the hot asphalt. The night air was cool, but he was sweating. He began to run back the way he had come, the beam of his flashlight bouncing frantically over the black road. He didn't want to look. He didn't want to see what a 100-ton truck does to a human body, but he had to know. He ran past the rear trailer, then the middle one, then the first one. He reached the skid marks. They were black scars on the road, stretching back into the darkness. He swept the light across the asphalt. Nothing. He swept it again. No blood, no body, no pile of clothes. Vincent stopped. He spun in a circle, shining the light into the tall grass on the side of the road. Hello? He shouted. His voice sounded small and weak in the vastness of the outback. Can you hear me? Nothing but the wind rustling the dry spinifex grass. Was he crazy? Had he fallen asleep? Had he hallucinated the whole thing? The white line fever, as truckers call it, can do strange things to your mind after 12 hours of driving. But then he heard it. A sound coming from the scrub on the western side of the road. A low, guttural whimper. Then a rustle. Vincent swung the beam of light toward the noise. From the darkness, a figure emerged. It was the woman. She was alive. She stumbled out of the brush and onto the gravel shoulder. She was small, wearing a t-shirt and shorts that were filthy with red dust. Her hair was a matted mess. Help me, she screamed. He's coming, he's going to kill me. Vincent ran to her. As he got closer, the beam of his flashlight revealed details that turned his confusion into cold, hard terror. This wasn't just a stranded motorist. This was a victim. There was duct tape tangled in her hair. There was residue of tape around her mouth, as if she had been gagged and had chewed through it. But it was her hands that made Vincent freeze. Her wrists were bound behind her back, but not just with rope. They were locked together with homemade restraints, black cable ties that had been looped and fused together. She had somehow managed to bring her bound hands from behind her back, down past her hips, and under her legs, so they were now in front of her, but she was still shackled. She grabbed Vincent's shirt, her eyes wide and wild, darting back toward the darkness she had just come from. "He has a gun," she sobbed. "He has a dog. He shot Peter. You have to get me out of here." This woman was Joanne Lees, and the story she was about to tell Vincent would become the most infamous true crime mystery in Australian history. To understand how Joanne ended up bound and terrified in the middle of the desert, we have to go back 6 hours. Joanne Lees and her boyfriend, Peter Falconio, were young, in love, and on the adventure of a lifetime. Peter was 28, a happy-go-lucky guy from Huddersfield, England. Joanne was 27. They had been traveling around the world, Nepal, Thailand, Cambodia, and now they were tackling Australia. They had bought an old, beat-up, orange Volkswagen Combi van. It was the quintessential backpacker vehicle, slow, unreliable, but full of character. They were driving it all the way from Sydney to Darwin. On the afternoon of July 14th, they stopped at a roadhouse in Tea Tree to refuel. It was a beautiful evening. They watched the sunset over the desert, sharing a joint and talking about their future. They were planning to get to Darwin, sell the van, and maybe head to Asia next. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, they climbed back into the Combi and continued north. Peter was driving. Joanne was in the passenger seat, reading a book by the dim map light. Cruising speed in a Combi van is about 50 miles per hour. It's loud, it rattles, and you feel every bump in the road. Around 7:30 p.m., headlights appeared behind them. This wasn't unusual. Road trains and four-wheel drives often overtook the slow-moving van. Peter watched the rearview mirror. It was a white Toyota utility truck, a UTE as Australians call it, with a green canvas canopy over the back bed. The UTE didn't pass immediately. It lingered behind them. Then, the driver of the UTE turned on his interior dome light. Peter frowned. What's this guy doing? The UTE pulled out into the passing lane and pulled up alongside the Combi. The driver, a man with a handlebar mustache and a baseball cap, was gesturing frantically. He was pointing at the back of their van, mouthing something. He's saying something about the back, Peter said, shouting over the engine noise. Maybe the exhaust? The Combi had been having engine trouble. It had been backfiring recently. Peter, worried that their home on wheels was about to break down in the middle of nowhere, eased off the gas and pulled over to the sandy shoulder of the highway. The white UTE pulled over about 30 yards behind them. I'll go check it out, Peter said. He killed the engine. Be careful, Joanne said. It was an automatic thing to say. There was no reason to be afraid. This was Australia. People were friendly. If you broke down, people helped you. That was the code of the Outback. Peter hopped out of the driver's side door and walked to the back of the van. Joanne stayed inside. She watched in the side mirror as the stranger got out of his UTE and walked toward Peter. They met at the back of the Combi, out of Joanne's line of sight. She could hear their voices. They were muffled, but they sounded calm, normal, just two guys talking about an exhaust pipe. "Give it a rev, Joe!" Peter shouted from the back. Joanne scuttled over to the driver's seat, turned the key, and revved the engine. The old Volkswagen roared to life. "Okay, cut it!" Peter yelled. She turned the engine off. Silence returned to the desert. She waited. She expected Peter to come back to the window and tell her it was just a loose bracket or a blown gasket. She heard the crunch of gravel. She looked at the side mirror, expecting to see Peter walking back. Instead, she heard a sound that didn't belong. Crack. It was a sharp, loud pop, like a car backfiring or a firecracker. "Peter?" she called out. No answer. A few seconds later, a shadow appeared at the driver's side window. Joanne turned, a smile forming on her lips, ready to ask Peter what the noise was. But it wasn't Peter. It was a stranger. He was standing there, staring at her with cold, dead eyes. And in his hand, he was holding a silver revolver. "Move over," he said calmly. Joanne froze. Her brain couldn't process the image. The gun. The man. Where was Peter? "I said move over," he barked, opening the door. He shoved her across the bench seat. He climbed into the driver's seat, the gun pointed at her chest. He pulled out a roll of duct tape and a handful of black cable ties. "Put your hands behind your back," he ordered. Joanne, paralyzed by terror, complied. He bound her wrists tightly with the cable ties. Then he forced her head down and wrapped duct tape around her mouth and eyes. He dragged her out of the van. Joanne was kicking, screaming behind the gag, fighting for her life. She tried to look for Peter, but it was too dark and the man was too strong. He dragged her toward his white UTE. In the back of the UTE, under the green canvas canopy, there was a dog, a large, agitated dog that was barking and snapping at her. "Get in!" the man snarled. He lifted her up and threw her into the bed of the truck onto a pile of sacks and equipment. This was it. She was going to die. She knew it. But then, the man did something strange. He walked away. He went back toward the combi van, presumably to deal with Peter's body or to move the vehicles off the road to hide the evidence. Joanne lay there in the darkness of the truck bed, the smell of dog and grease filling her nose. She realized she had seconds, maybe minutes, before he came back. She wasn't going to wait to die. Adrenaline flooded her system. She began to wriggle. She twisted her wrists, ignoring the plastic biting into her skin. She found a gap in the canvas canopy at the back of the UTE. She pushed herself backward, falling out of the truck and landing hard on the dirt. She didn't stand up. Standing up would make her a silhouette against the stars. Instead, she rolled. She rolled into the tall grass, into the spinifex, scrambling like an animal away from the road, away from the truck, deep into the pitch black scrub. She didn't stop until her lungs were burning. She found a small depression in the earth, a bush, and curled herself into a ball. She used her teeth to tear at the tape on her mouth, ripping skin off her lips, gasping for air. And then she listened. She heard the man come back. She heard him curse. She heard the UTE door slam. Then she heard the truck start up. The headlights swept across the desert, missing her by feet. The truck drove slowly up the road, then turned around. He was hunting her. For the next 5 hours, Joanne Lees lay in the dirt, shivering in the freezing desert night. She listened to the sound of the UTE driving up and down the highway. She listened to the man walking through the grass with a flashlight. She heard the dog barking, sniffing for her scent. Every time the wind rustled the grass, she thought it was him. Every time a shadow moved, she thought it was the dog. She saw road trains pass by on the highway, their massive lights cutting through the dark. She wanted to run to them, but she was too scared. What if the killer saw her first? What if he was waiting? Finally, around midnight, the silence stretched out. The UTE hadn't passed in a while. When she saw the lights of Vincent Millar's road train approaching in the distance, she knew this was her last chance. If she didn't move now, the cold might kill her, or the man might come back with the sunrise. She stood up. Her legs were numb. She stumbled toward the road, praying that this truck driver was paying attention. Back in the cab of the road train, Vincent Millar listened to this terrified woman's story in stunned silence. He looked at her wrists. The cable ties were real. He looked at her neck. The red marks from the tape were real. This wasn't a prank. "We have to go," Joanne screamed. "He's still out there." Vincent helped her climb up into the high cab of the Kenworth. He locked the doors. He woke his co-driver fully now. "Get up. We've got a situation." Vincent slammed the truck into gear. The massive engine roared, and the road train began to crawl forward, slowly building momentum. As they picked up speed, Vincent checked his side mirrors. His blood ran cold. About a mile back, on the long, straight stretch of highway they had just left, a pair of headlights had appeared. They weren't the lights of another truck. They were lower, sharper. "Is that him?" Vincent asked, watching the mirror. Joanne looked back, whimpering. "It's him. It's the white UTE." The vehicle behind them wasn't trying to pass. It was matching their speed. It was stalking them. Vincent floored the accelerator. The road train groaned, the speedometer slowly climbing. 40, 50, 60. The lights in the mirror stayed there. For the next hour, a terrifying game of cat and mouse played out on the Stuart Highway. Vincent pushed the rig as hard as it would go, his eyes darting between the road ahead and the mirrors behind. The vehicle tailed them relentlessly, sometimes dropping back, sometimes speeding up as if to pull alongside. Joanne was huddled on the floor of the cab, convinced that at any moment a bullet would shatter the window. Finally, the lights of the Barrow Creek Hotel appeared in the distance. It was an old bush pub, a relic of the telegraph station days, but to Vincent and Joanne, it looked like a fortress. Vincent swung the massive road train into the gravel parking lot, the dust billowing up around them. He didn't wait for the truck to stop completely before he was reaching for the radio. Another truck driver, Rodney Adams, was already parked there. He saw Vincent's rig come in hot and jumped out to see what was wrong. Vincent and his co-driver practically carried Joanne into the pub. The publican locked the doors. They called the police in Alice Springs. While they waited for the cops, a wait that would take hours given the distance, Vincent and Rodney stood guard with tire irons, watching the highway. The white UTE never pulled into the parking lot. The driver, seeing the safety of the hotel and the other trucks, had turned around and vanished back into the night. When the Northern Territory Police arrived, they launched one of the biggest manhunts in Australian history. They found the tire tracks where Joanne said the attack happened. They found the pool of Peter Falconio's blood on the dirt, so much blood that it confirmed he could not have survived. They found the orange combi van abandoned deep in the scrub a few miles away. It had been hidden, covered with branches. But they didn't find Peter. Joanne Lees went through hell. The media turned on her. They didn't believe her story. She was too calm in interviews, they said. Her story was too wild. How did she escape the tape? How did she outrun a dog? For years, she was looked at with suspicion, the girl on the highway who might have killed her own boyfriend. But the science vindicated her. DNA found on Joanne's t-shirt a tiny smear of blood that wasn't hers and wasn't Peter's matched, a man in the police database. His name was Bradley John Murdoch. Murdoch was a mechanic, a drifter, and a drug runner who frequently moved large quantities of cannabis across the country. He drove a white Toyota Land Cruiser UTE with a green canopy. He owned a Dalmatian cross dog. Police tracked him down. When they arrested him, they found he had changed the canopy on his truck. He had cut his hair. He had changed the appearance of his vehicle, but he couldn't change his DNA. In 2005, Bradley John Murdoch was found guilty of the murder of Peter Falconio and the abduction of Joanne Lees. He was sentenced to life in prison. The trial revealed that Murdoch had likely spotted the couple at the Red Rooster in Alice Springs earlier that day or at the Tea Tree Roadhouse. He had stalked them for hours, waiting for the cover of total darkness to make his move. But there is one part of the story that remains unresolved. Despite massive searches, despite pleas from Peter's family, and despite Murdoch dying in prison in a shroud of secrets, Peter Falconio's body has never been found. Some believe Murdoch dissolved it in acid. He had purchased large quantities of sulfuric acid before the trip. Others believe he threw it down one of the thousands of abandoned mine shafts that litter the Outback. Or perhaps Peter is simply buried in a shallow grave, somewhere off the track, hidden by the endless red dirt. Joanne Lees survived because she had the will to run into the black void of the desert, and because a truck driver named Vincent Millar was paying attention when a shadow moved in the night. So, the next time you are driving down a lonely highway at night, and you see a shadow on the side of the road, slow down. Because sometimes the things in the dark are monsters, but sometimes they are the ones running from them. The Outback is a place of immense beauty, but as we've seen tonight, it's also a place that keeps its secrets. Bradley John Murdoch took his secrets to the grave, and Peter Falconio remains part of that endless red horizon, a mystery that may never be fully solved. I want to know what you think. Do you believe Peter will ever be found? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have your own stories from the road, creepy encounters, unexplained sightings, or close calls, send them to me at mycreepyencounter@gmail.com. I love to read them. If you enjoyed tonight's ride, please hit that like button and subscribe to Channel 19 Mysteries for more stories from the darkness. I'm Midnight Rider. Stay safe out there.